So anyway, I always assumed it was Uptown Funk don't give it to you. But then I saw Uptown Funk gonna give it to you. One word difference, completely different meaning.
Yeah, so this is the first episode. I'm kind of dreading it, to be honest.
When I come and enjoy. This is the state I'm in.
Hi there, and welcome to the first video of a new channel. In this video series, I'm going to be doing three things. 1, arranging and recording songs in my home studio on this narrowboat on the Thames. 2, planning and shooting music videos for those songs. And 3, documenting how they went. What went well and what didn't.
Sometimes.
I'm James Bell, and this is The Process. If you don't mind. So, what's the song we're doing today? Yeah, so this is the first episode of this series. This is the first algorithm video that I'm doing. I'm kind of dreading it, to be honest. I'm at the stage now where I just feel like all that's ahead of me is problems. Because I'm not really a filmmaker. You know, I've spent a lot of time being a musician who's based in the studio. Some of that translates onto screen, some of it doesn't. So yeah, it's going to be an adventure for both of us. Okay, so the story so far. If you are seeing this on YouTube, I am personally quite surprised because the point of this is not to actually make it for release. This is the test run. I wanted to pick a song to cover, and I wanted to pick something that I didn't mind if it screwed up. The first thing I thought about was, okay, right, think of a song that just does not need to be covered. Think of a song that just completely nails what it does. So you don't need to listen back and go, you know, maybe if I did it properly. For me, it's a fantastic pop song, and it's complete. I was going to say it's completely complete. Let's go with that. It's completely complete. It's a coherent, in a weird way. I sort of think of it as like it's a hermetically sealed song. Like it does everything it's supposed to do, and it's the kind of song where if someone were to say to me, "Uptown Funk cover," I'd be like, "Nah, I'm alright. It's fine. It doesn't need anything done to it." I didn't want to pick, like I've got a big list of songs that I think would be really good fun to do. I didn't want to pick one of them and then bollocks it up. Kind of the purpose of this video is to bollocks it up and just try and get the mistakes done early on. I really think there is something to moving fast and breaking things, in as much as that you have this great idea in your head and it is soon going to interface with the world. And when it does, it's going to fall apart. Because reality is going to mess up your plans, because everything fits together in your head and reality is just more complicated than that. So get to that point as soon as you can. Get to the point where things break. It's not a case of move fast and if you break things, so what? It's a case of things are going to get broken. Get them broken at the beginning before you take your thing to everyone else and go, oh shit, the leg's fallen off, you know. So cheers. What the fuck was I talking about? Dumb. Uptown Funk. Okay, so. Uptown Funk by Mark Ronson featuring Bruno Mars was released on the 10th of November 2014 to massive commercial and critical success. It topped the charts in multiple countries, broke several records, won numerous awards including Grammy Awards for Record of the Year and Best Pop Duo, and a Brit Award for Single of the Year. It's been played constantly on the radio, television, and social media, as well as being featured in countless movies, TV shows, and advertisements. And it was widely covered and even parodied by various artists and online personalities. The music video is currently the 9th most viewed video on YouTube with just shy of 5 billion views. So why did it hit such a nerve? Maybe it's the combination of Bruno Mars's super charismatic performance, combined with Mark Ronson's deep knowledge of American music, with references to Quincy Jones, Stevie Wonder, Nile Rodgers, and of course, James Brown. I think a big part of its appeal is that it sounds like everyone involved is just having a blast. Ronson and Mars have talked in interviews about how the song's creation was a very long, grueling process with lots of drafts, and it was nearly abandoned. Clearly, they both had a very specific vision, and they weren't going to stop until they got it right. Thus far, I've got like one idea for how to cover this. And yeah, I don't know. I've been dreading this, to be honest. I've been dreading putting this together because I don't know. I don't know whether or not I'm going to be able to make a music video. I think the thing is, I can make it. I'm sure I can make it. But like, will it take a decade? You know, I need to be able to make it in a way that, oh, fun fact, my wife is due to give birth to our first child and kind of any day now. This is a really stupid time to be starting this project. So like, I better be able to do this quick or it's never going to get done. Excuse me. I hope I find something new and interesting to say. And also, you know, here's kind of a key thing. I think one of the dangers with Uptown Funk is there's a danger you can just be like winking all the way through. That you can fail to appreciate that the song is a bit of a wink at the camera anyway. It's an affectionate, it's a pastiche. It's not a parody. It's not making fun. It's not ridiculing. It is taking joy in the fact that, you know, elements of this might be a bit cheesy, but who cares? It brings joy. It sparks joy. It's a Marie Kondo classic. Something I'm wondering about is maybe making it a little bit more laid back, a little bit more chilled out, emphasizing the groove on it. I kind of feel like I have to on that because I feel like the groove is such a key part of that track. Got no idea how I'm going to sing it. I haven't sung in an American accent since I was a baby, and like, I'll do it if it's the only way of making the track work, but I'd kind of like to sing as me if possible. And I think that's one of the things I was going to say. I want to treat the track with respect. I want to not be too winky and be too ironic. I think maybe the way in is just kind of relaxed, but really concentrating on the groove. And as I say that, I wonder whether or not that means, are we stripping out instruments here? Are we making this much more percussive? Are we leaving a lot of space in the mix? Quite possibly. That may well be the angle. I don't know. Whew. Well, that was a kind of a good initial torrent. I was worried I was not going to have something to say. Shame on me. By the way, for complicated reasons, I can't actually include the music video in this episode, but there will be a link to it at the end. If you want a sneak peek now, or if you'd like to learn even more about how it was made, there's links in the description. Anyway, on with the show. Thinking about your body, thinking about your face, I'm thinking about your body, thinking about your face. Oh baby, I'm thinking about your body, thinking about your face now. Thinking About Your Body by Bobby McFerrin. That's like my one idea so far. That kind of... Sometimes if you really want to accentuate a groove, one of the best instruments to use is the human voice. That could go very wrong. Right, let's talk about personas for a moment. As I start the kind of filming process, I'm very aware of how easy it is to just kind of slip into a persona. In relation to the track, in relation to a cover of Uptown Funk, I'm thinking about accents and whether or not I should sing this with an American accent, which I never normally do. I mean, so much of what I play comes from an English traditional music background. I like to try to sing as me. However, every once in a while, I like to dress up in a costume and be a persona and perform as a different character. For this track, I think
The lyrics, the phrasing of the lyrics, the use of slang and whatever else, this is going to sound weird, my accent. But it may well sound weird me doing an American accent as well. I don't know whether or not me putting on an American accent is going to sound odd. It's something I did when I was like a young teenager, but sort of midway through my teens, I deliberately pivoted to trying to sing with my own voice. I don't know if it's going to work. I'm going to need to test it. That's the key thing. The way I think to make it work is to record it on the understanding that it's going to sound bad, and then see what needs tweaking and tweak it. Okay, so I mentioned that Uptown Funk is a really tricky song to approach because I feel like it does everything it's supposed to do, and coming at it from a different angle seems kind of weird. I was wondering whether or not some sort of Bobby McFerrin, very vocal-based approach might be the way in. I think of things in terms of a way in, and a really good example of this is that sometimes the way that you crack a problem like that is you just do something else. So whatever it was I was doing last night, I suddenly had an idea which just kicked off a chain reaction of a whole load of other ideas. I think the key thing is I was thinking, all right, it's all very well thinking of a thing that you can do that sounds good, like creating groove using voice as an instrument. But there are some kind of logistics to actually covering the song. There are some points in the song that you need to recreate somehow. There's like lots of build-ups, there's lots of tension you need to create, and you need instruments that are going to do that. You can decide, and I've kind of done this in the past, you can decide you're going to do the whole thing on kazoo, and then you just realize, oh yeah, kazoo just doesn't have the power to, carry this thing off. So I was last night just thinking about that logistical problem. Okay, like what instrument are we going to do? I was also thinking I'd like it to be fairly minimal. Generally speaking, I want to try and keep these tracks and these videos fairly minimal because otherwise it's going to take me 100 years. But it's also the case that the original track is quite dense and really well produced. And so in order to come up with something different, it makes sense to pick something minimal. What instrument is going to be able to do as much of the heavy lifting for that particular track as possible? And I thought, how about Hammond organ? How about just kind of standard B3 Hammond organ, particularly with some saturation, distortion, overdrive, something like that. A Hammond organ is an extraordinarily versatile instrument, and it's particularly good for filling up the mid-range. So if you want something that is minimal but yet can make a big sound, definitely something to play with. So that's something I'm going to try. So that was the starting point. And then a whole bunch of other ideas came off the back of that. One of the things that I'm doing in this particular episode, it's going to be kind of rambling and incoherent. I'm sorry about that, but I'm trying to figure out what the format is. And I feel like trying to come up with a new subgenre each time might be a fun thing to do. And I had this idea of kind of satanic lounge music, but satanic lounge music as a particular angle. And I'm also going to be doing a video of this, so I started getting ideas about what the video might be like, and I just kept getting this image of Christopher Walken, because, we've got this sort of 80s New York thing, and I just feel, and also a song about dancing. Yeah, anyway, those are some rambling ideas. Let's see where they go. I feel I'm gradually figuring out what I'm doing here. I'm not just figuring out this track, but also how I'm going to go through this process and make these videos in future. I'm starting by using GarageBand for iOS, which I'm a really big fan of. I like how simple and uncluttered it is, and I also like the fact that I can then take everything there and put it into Logic Pro and use all my fun plugins on it. So I've started putting the basic track together in GarageBand iOS, and I've also had a listen through the track. Uptown Funk. This is the fun part, listening through the track and breaking down its component parts. How many of these I'm going to use, I don't know. Ordinarily, I'd like to try to come up with some completely different approach to the track, particularly in terms of accompaniment. But these are some really nice, I keep using that phrase, component parts. Let's just go through a few. So, first of all, I'm doing standard tuning in drop D. Marginally in tune. You got this. And then there's this Nile Rodgers sort of neo-soul sound. Very clean, very compressed. One good example of this is this riff. So you would have. Another one I noticed, so we're in D, is I might not be getting that exactly right, but that's what it sounded like on the first listen. The one part that I think I'd never really noticed before, which I think is so inspired, is you've got this big build. So much of the track is just vocals over a beat with no other instruments playing, which is kind of a bold move that I really like. There's a lot of space in that track. But so you have one time round, Uptown Funk, Don't Give It To You, and then you've got, and I'll try and count it in, you've got various, I think, synth parts doing this kind of rise, but you've got the bass going, cause Uptown Funk, don't give it to you. Cause don't believe me, just one bound. That's just inspired, I think. So, am I gonna pinch those? I don't know. I like to be aware that they are there and have them as something I might want to draw inspiration from. I bet I'll use that bass part. I bet I'll probably use most of it. Meanwhile, 6 months later, I think the last time I made a recording for this was in June, and it is now December. In that period of time, I've been thinking about this whole concept of the process. A YouTube series which is about the creative process, specifically focusing on making a particular kind of music video, but more generally than that. And in thinking about that, it's occurred to me that, you know, I can incorporate a lot into the overall process. It's not just the actual kind of recording and composing, it's getting the conditions right in order to be able to work. So I was wondering, how much do I talk about the last 6 months? Is it even relevant? If I'm telling a tight story, I probably wouldn't mention it. But then again, I don't know. The way that I make these is I just try and record everything and then leave it down to the editing to figure out what's relevant and what isn't. So, more coffee. Here's what's happened in the last 6 months. And I feel it's kind of interesting in terms of the process. A week or 2 weeks after the last video I made, my father died. 4 days after that, my wife gave birth to our daughter and I became a dad for the first time. And then I think a couple of weeks after that, we moved house. This incidentally is no longer where I live, it is now my office. And yeah, a lot went on. Yeah, actually, I mean, really the reason why I wanted to record this, in terms of fitting into this overall idea of the process, is that I feel like, for me, making a creative project essentially for fun, when you're looking at the process of that, one of the most natural things is you can't do it for 6 months. Like, that's something I've experienced again and again and again. You've just got to put it on pause. The process of doing any project and doing all of the projects is all about just looking at your to-do list, looking at the projects, looking at the tasks, saying, how much time have I got? What can I work on now? What should I work on now? What's just got to wait? And unfortunately, just in terms of the priorities and the seriousness of a lot of the stuff that's been happening, I've just had to put this on the back burner. But yeah, hopefully back now. Hopefully let's get back into it. Okay, so let's do a little bit of a catch up. So like at the moment, I actually cannot remember what I last worked on. I think I got to the point where I have created what I would call a skeleton track. I'm working in GarageBand on an iPad at the moment. I think I had created a very rough kind of draft recording of me singing and playing guitar for the entire track. And that's how I start. I need that to be able to get a sense of what the structure is, what I might want to do with it. And then when I actually start composing, I'll have that in the background. I mean, it's just a simple practical thing of, if I'm recording a part, am I in the second verse, the third verse? You know, actually having that as a way of telling you what the placeholder is. I guess I'm at the point now where I just need to start layering a part, basically. I need to pick an instrument and I need to just start at the beginning of the track, record the whole thing, see if it sounds good. If it doesn't, tweak it. If I get it sounding good, then I think, what would complement that? And then I add something else, and I do that a layer at a time. I've tried in the past, and I think pretty much always failed, to get an idea of an arrangement beforehand. But I really find that once you do one part, that's actually going to set the tone, and you can't know how it's going to set the tone until it's done. So it makes sense to think of an arrangement as a single layer at a time. So I guess with the skeleton track done, I've been thinking of this idea of Hammond organ. I think probably that's going to be the next thing, just recording the Hammond organ part, trying to get it sounding as good as possible. Actually, no. I think it's probably going to be the drums, because I think that drums and percussion makes such a difference. I mean, that really sets the tone, and you don't need to think about the musicality. You don't need to think about what the harmony's going to be. You don't need to think about any of the intricacies of that. You are just thinking about the feel. Getting the feel right at the beginning with the drums, I feel, makes it so much easier to layer parts on top. As I said, it sets the tone. So I guess that's next, setting the tone. Okay, so I've just been crazy busy recently and haven't had as much time to work on this as I would have liked. I'd already got some of the basics down. Sometimes, I'm going to need that. Sometimes sometimes I need like one riff or one idea that just is a catalyst for everything else and really starts the ideas flowing. I think I might have just got it. Here's what I got so far. So, we got this. That bass line. And here's what I think the groove's going to be like. And then this riff. I like it. Even if it is a little bit, very superstitious. Good morning. It is a cold, is my breath condensing? Nearly. A cold January morning. Quite a lot happened since the last little update I did. Kind of the story so far. I'd got this one riff, like high bass organ riff, which just was a bit different and felt interesting. And from that, I felt like, okay, now I can see how I can actually do a cover of this so well-known track in a way that's a little bit distinctive. Shall I do the thing? I'll do the thing. Every track I make, whether or not it's for myself, whether or not I'm doing something for YouTube, whether or not it's for a professional client, I am always trying to do three things. First of all, it needs to be distinctive. There needs to be a reason why this track exists. If there's another track that does the same thing, if it's not distinctive, it doesn't have a reason to exist. So that's crucial. But being distinctive is quite easy. You can just go pick up an instrument, play something totally random. You can just do noise, distinctive noise, and it will not sound like another track, but it won't be any good. And it won't be any good because it isn't coherent. The first thing it needs to be is distinctive. The second thing it needs to be is coherent. In other words, the distinctiveness needs to seem like it actually has a purpose. The third thing is it needs to sound good in a non-intellectual way. You need to want, or I need to want to listen to it for pleasure. If it's a great idea, if it sounds great conceptually, it's like this idea combined with this idea combined with this idea. If it's got a great aesthetic, but I wouldn't actually want to listen to it for pleasure, it's failed as far as I'm concerned. So those are the three things. And I often feel in the creative process that for me, and I think a lot of people get this, there's an initial hurdle that you need to get over where you're slightly feeling around in the dark and then it's like the light switches come on. So I did that organ riff, and then later that day, I thought I'm going to just add like one little bit to it. And then 2 hours later, I'd kind of fleshed out the whole track. I hadn't recorded all the parts, hadn't recorded even all the kind of draft parts, but I had a sense of how it was going to sound. I can procrastinate and procrastinate actually getting down to doing recording, but it's usually not as hard as I think it's going to be, particularly once I've got over that hurdle. The phrase I use is, it's like the army thing of your training takes over. And it feels like I've now moved from trying different things, seeing what character the track is going to have, to instead getting a to-do list and just filling it with tasks and just ticking them off. That's kind of what I feel like I'm doing. Also, up to this point, I've been using GarageBand on an iPad, but I now feel like I'm at a point where I need to move from this very good drafting software, GarageBand, to the professional software I use, to Logic Pro. And because they're both made by Apple, it's an easy kind of transfer. And here's what I think the personality of the track is going to be. Here's what I think is going to come next. So I've currently got this drum part recorded. I've got the organ part recorded. The organ part needs finishing really, and the drum part needs finishing, but I feel like I know how to do that. I drafted a bass part. I don't want to do keyboard bass because I feel like that's too much of a repetition of the original track. I've got a Fender Strat, the first electric guitar I ever bought, and I use much thicker strings so it's tuned to a C rather than the normal guitar E. I'm going to use that to do the bass line with an octave pedal. Or at least I'm going to try it and see if it's going to work. I'm going to put down a kind of Nile Rodgers rhythm guitar part, which is what the original track has got, but I feel like I can do that without it feeling too samey. I need something that's going to replicate the horn part. I've kind of done that with the organ, but the organ is, I feel like it needs something else. And I was listening to a track, I can't remember where, and I heard I think it was a Scary Pockets track actually. And I heard this guitar fuzz sound that reminded me of the sort of Ennio Morricone Fistful of Dollars soundtrack stuff, which everyone kind of plunders, but that's because it sounds great. And it did make me think, yeah, I could maybe use that fuzz sound for the horn part. So that's what I'm thinking of doing. If it doesn't work, I'll come up with something else. Then I've got this new harmony pedal, which is still in the box, which I will need to test out. I'm going to try that for backing vocals, and then probably finally I'll do lead vocals. I often like to do lead vocals right at the beginning because you need to get it right and then build everything else around it. But this time I'm going to kick it to the end, and I think it's probably going to take a lot of time to get right. I'm confident about the fact that I can sing it in tune and I can make it sound all right, but it communicates so much personality. I often think of the lead vocal performance as being like the lead performance in a play or a film. You know, it's not the only thing that's important, but it's often the thing that the audience is focusing on, so you need to get it right. So that may take a bit of time. Okay, so today we're recording some guitar parts. I've been thinking, originally, I had this idea of the Uptown Funk cover version being the Satanic Lounge version. Like I wanted something, some kind of angle that wasn't quite a genre, because I don't find that super interesting, doing like a country version or a folk version or a trap version or whatever. I'd much rather just do something a little bit more, for me, a little bit more interesting. Not judging, that's my bag. Speaking of which. So I had this idea, the Satanic Lounge version, and I thought about Hammond organ as being the key to it. And as I started to think about it, it occurred to me, Uptown Funk is basically a love letter to the pop music of the 1980s and also to the culture of the 1980s. There's all sorts of references, Saint Laurent and this sort of thing. So I found myself coming up with all sorts of ideas that seemed to fit into more of a 1960s thing. And after a while I was like, why not just turn this into a love letter to the 1960s? So I had this idea of, okay, Hammond was quite a sort of 1960s sound, maybe some sort of Ennio Morricone fuzz guitar, slightly kind of John Barry, James Bond theme, that kind of thing. But as I've been developing the track, a different angle has started to appear. I found myself going back to the mid-60s to arguably one of the pioneers of funk. I'm sure he would have argued he was the pioneer of funk, a certain Mr. James Brown. And particularly James Brown's guitar player, Jimmy Nolan, who was kind of a proto Nile Rodgers in terms of guitar playing. And as that idea started to develop, I found myself fixating on one track in particular, Papa's Got a Brand New Bag. And I felt like this should be the sonic template for a 1960s version of Uptown Funk. And on that note, Uptown Funk starts off with the lyrics, "This hit, that ice cold, Michelle Pfeiffer, that white gold." Michelle Pfeiffer was possibly my first celebrity crush. I literally cut a picture out of a magazine and stuck it on my school desk. Now, I don't want to update all of the references of Uptown Funk. I think that would get kind of tedious, but I do feel like that opening line, I just sort of thought, shouldn't it be another actress? Another actress that summed up the kind of 60s glamour in the way that Michelle Pfeiffer very much summed up the 80s. And I initially thought Mia Farrow, because it's got to be someone who kind of, the rhythm kind of scans in the lyrics. This hit, that ice cold, that Mia Farrow, that white gold. That might work, but then I thought it should really be Jane Fonda, shouldn't it? It should be kind of Barbarella, Jane Fonda. So I'm going to try both when I'm doing the vocals, which I'm not doing today. I'm going to see which one sounds better. If neither of them sound good, I'll IMDb another actress, and if none of that works, I'll just go with Michelle Pfeiffer. I think that's pretty much everything. I better get on. I'm working on the track. I'm trying to, quickly punch in a jazz organ solo. Turns out I don't know as much about jazz organ as I thought I did, and it's not quick at all. I'm looping it, and I'm trying to just come up with something interesting, and everything I do is falling flat. Guess I just got to push through until it sounds right. Okay, so today I'm going to record the vocal parts. Now, it's summer, it's the afternoon on a narrowboat, which is less than ideal. I need to close the windows and doors because of sound insulation, but that's basically going to turn the boat into a hot car. So the clock is kind of ticking. But if I can get the vocal parts recorded today, that's all the live recording done. And that means I can finish the mixing of the track on my laptop, which is a big deal. I've waited a long time for that. So now I need to do some final prep and I need to make some decisions. I think I'm going to try and sing from my chest rather than my throat, at least to begin with. And I need to decide about the accent. If I'm going to do an American accent at all, I just need to commit to it, basically. All of which brings me to one last order of business, which is actually figuring out what the lyrics are. Now, sure, you can look at it online, but they differ. For example, Girls Hit You Hallelujah, which I choose to interpret as a celebration of women initiating a romantic liaison, which I see as a pleasing reversal of convention and probably a better way of organising heterosexual relationships. But after that, I always assumed it was Uptown Funk, don't give it to you. But then I saw Uptown Funk, gonna give it to you. One word difference, completely different meaning. Now, do we even think Uptown Funk has a meaning? Yes. Yes, we do. Here at The Process, if a song doesn't have meaning, we don't bother covering it. The way I see it, each song has got a message that the singer is singing, even if it's gibberish. The song is not about the message. The song is about the emotion of the message. That's why lots of great songs have got kind of daft lyrics. It's not about the message, it's about the emotion of the message. But in order to get the emotion right, you need to know what the message is. So I'm going to need to do some listening to Spotify. I'll be right back. I'm too hot. Okay, a little thing I forgot to do. Work out the kind of what sounds like ad-libs for Don't Believe Me, Just Watch, where Bruno Mars does some fantastic kind of vocal gymnastics. And I don't know whether or not he's improvising. It's the kind of thing I would need to work out in advance and practice a bit, and I forgot to do that. So I don't know whether or not I'm just going to kind of randomly scream, or if I'm going to get my breath back and go in and refine it. No idea. History will decide. Okay, I'm just going to try and do a quick whistle-stop tour of what the mix looks like in Logic Pro. I'm going to try not to go into too much detail, or we'll be here all day, but if you've got any questions, do put them in the comments. So, drums, we have got Stephen Slate, Deluxe Big Band Benny, Claps, we've got some samples that I got from a library, but I can't remember which one. Bass. Bass is a Fender Strat with baritone strings through an octave pedal. And then the rhythm part is a baritone Dan Electro that I've got with standard strings because I sort of got them the wrong way around. That's a story for another time. Anyway, there's a horn part at the end of the track that you can't really hear, but that I doubled with a sort of fuzz guitar part. I put it in here and then I just muted it because it didn't really work. It only comes in at the very end there. I've got a Hammond organ. This is very me. You'll notice that I've split the parts left and right. I am not playing this live. I am not that good a keyboard player. I think this is just the stock Logic organ sound with some slate effects on, this kind of thing. And then horns. These are from Contact. Yep. So it was just kind of playing around with these. And yeah, I was really surprised by how good or how happy I was with the result at the end of it. Backing vocals and main vocals. Main vocals are doubled. There's my kind of chain on that. Backing vocals, I got 3 on the left. I got 3 on the right. That's basically the mix. In terms of reverb, I've got this as a vocal plate. This is a slightly different plate for the rest of the mix. I've got Decapitator, which just adds some analog tube sound to the whole mix. I've got the drive pumped up quite a bit, so it's a bit more distorted than it would, ordinarily sound because I wanted to get a retro sound. This whole mix is kind of messy, quite deliberately. I would often go in and add, for example, I would normally add a lot of filters on the bottom end. I've clearly done that here to cut out bass frequencies. I wanted to leave in a few more, I'm not going to say mistakes, but I wanted to leave out, 21st century mixing polishing. So it felt a little bit more authentic, although I didn't want to go crazy with that. Like digital, what we've got. Oh yeah, the FGX mastering, got that kind of pumped up. I will usually put Isotope Ozone, which I'm a big fan of. I've got this for the headphones so I can hear the different environments that it's in. And I've got my various different meters, my Ian Shepherd dynameter, I found this really useful, Isotope tone balance control, and to see what kind of phasing problems there are. I'm not a recording engineer, so there are bound to be lots of phasing issues, but I generally try and kind of deal with them in the mix. I think that's pretty much it. I was hoping I would do this quicker, but there we go. Sort of looming over everything has been one particular part of this process. There's a bunch of hurdles that need to be cleared that I haven't done before. One of them is actually sorting out the licensing. I don't doubt that's going to be a headache. There's also going to be the case of finding enough interesting backdrop to put in the music video. I do feel like I am much more an audio than a video person, so I feel like I'm, slightly running to catch up on that. But the thing that I'm really feeling is going to be tricky is that I've had this idea of performing on the boat in front of a screen of some kind and then projecting something onto the screen behind me. I have got a projector that maybe costs £100. I've known in my heart that's not going to cut it, and even if it does, there just isn't the room on the boat, I'm pretty sure, to actually do this. I can put a screen across, but you're going to get the sofa in the frame. And you're probably going to get the piano in the frame as well. And I can cut them out in post, and I can do some sort of post-production trickery there. Maybe I have to. I made a note yesterday, I think, of just, wait a minute, what if I'm honest with myself? This just isn't going to work. Now, I don't normally like dismissing things before I've actually tested them thoroughly. And I've done a bit of testing and thought, okay, I've taken photos and thought maybe I could, cut this out and move this here and the like. But I don't know, it feels to me like maybe now is the point to seriously explore other options for the music video, because part of the whole point about this process idea is coming up with something which is going to be fun to do, most importantly is going to be hopefully interesting to watch, the kind of thing I'd find interesting to watch, but also can't be a logistical headache every single time. Because I mean, at the moment I get like, maybe like half a day on a weekend to work on this. I'm hoping I'm going to be able to squeeze some more time into it, but I can't guarantee it. So I have to be able to find some way of doing this as efficiently as possible. In terms of doing a music video with all of the other challenges in the process, I have to come up with something which is just not going to be a major headache every time, I guess. I am hopefully going to do a bit more work on, actually recording the track today and tomorrow, but just how the music video is going to look from a much more basic conceptual standpoint, I think that's the next thing I'm going to work on. Okay, so the track is done. Yeah, no, the track is done. And last night I started planning the video. I realized as I was doing it that I'd somehow started to think that I was on the home straight and that I was nearly done. Now I just needed to kind of figure out the video. But the thing is, I have got years and years and years of experience of recording music. I've got zero experience of making music videos. I've like done a few, I'm not going to say half-ass attempts, but I've done a few by myself for my own amusement where I don't really know what I'm doing. I want to try something much more ambitious now. And what I'm actually doing is storyboarding. Basically every camera shot, every lighting setup. I don't even know the words, every lighting setup. And yeah, why did I think this was going to be quick? All right, I'm still kind of figuring out how much of the process to talk through in every video, but I've struck on something which I think is interesting, which I want to talk about. I'm now moving out of my comfort zone to making a video. How do you approach this? Well, I thought, it's a music video. I'm going to break it down into 3 acts. Act 1 is pretty much up to the stop, wait a minute. Act 2 ends when there's kind of a breakdown. It's the Uptown funk you up bit. And then that just runs to the end. So that's Act 3. So I made some initial notes about what I thought I could do in Act 1, what I thought I could do in Act 2, what I thought I could do in Act 3. And I'm reaching the point now where I'm sort of brainstorming ideas, trying to go into details about, okay, what actually am I going to do in each of these acts? And I've looked back at the notes that I made, and it's just clear, just looking at my computer now, that the ideas that I've got for Act 1 are not even going to stretch for like the first 8 bars of Act 1. Like, they're just completely unrealistic. The ideas for Act 2 are really time intensive to film. And so I was thinking about that and thinking, well, how much effort do I go into? And I had this sensation of, come on, don't shortcut. Don't compromise on interesting ideas. Sure, it's going to take a long time to film, but do it properly and get it right. And then as soon as I thought that, I thought, no, that's an extremely stupid move. There are going to be delays when I mess up the most simple stuff. It's just not smart me adding other delays and telling myself, no, don't compromise. You have to compromise. Like, you have to compromise on any creative project. But if you're doing something new and doing something for the first time and it's already taken like over a year, you have to compromise. And the way to actually end up with something which is good and finished is how smart you compromise. And that's what I need to do now. I need to go over these ideas for Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, and I need to be really smart about where I can compromise. Okay, back again. Production stopped for something of an epic heat wave in the UK. We had a couple of days ago the highest temperatures ever recorded. Got to love that climate change. But back now. So, where have I got to? I mentioned the last little video that I did that I'd put together this 3-act structure and was getting weighed down by how complicated it was, and yet how little juice there was in the orange for each of these kind of act ideas. So I actually went back to the Mark Ronson, Bruno Mars. Why can't they have simpler names? They're actually incredibly simple names. So I actually went back to the Mark Ronson, Bruno Mars video to try and get some ideas about how that video does the 3-act structure. It's a masterclass. It's really well done. Like, the beginning of the video, which is quite a, Act 1 in that video is really quite big. It's just them in the street from different angles. And then it starts to introduce a few, the band in, different locations. It's just a really kind of good progression. And that gave me some ideas about how I could break down what I want to do into 3 acts, but also how I could just be a bit simpler with it. You know, I don't think I need to plan every single cut, you know, every single, I plan scenes fine, but you know, I was starting out by trying to storyboard like every cut. And there may be music videos where that's a good strategy, depends on the basic concept that you're working from, but I don't think I need it with this. So yeah, I've actually got to do that planning. I've got the initial ideas, I now need to flesh it out, but I also need to get ready to turn this into a film studio, into somewhere that I can film. And that starts with blackout blinds. I've got a lot of lovely natural light. All of this has got to be cut out. So how to go about that? Well, you might see this rather lovely building material in the background. So I was originally going to just basically kind of tape bin liners to the windows, but I want to be able to do this regularly. I want to be able to kind of just block out all the light. And I was talking to one of my neighbors about this. So he said what they did is they got 3mm plywood and they just cut out basically a blackout blind. So I'm going to give that a try. I'm going to try and get some plywood. I'm going to try and make some more permanent blinds that I can put in to block out the light. But in order to start doing that, because I've watched lots of Adam Savage videos on YouTube, I know that the gateway drug to being a maker is cardboard. And I had a flash where I thought, where am I going to buy some cardboard? And then realized, oh yeah, I get Amazon deliveries. I got tons of cardboard. I got more cardboard than I know what to do with. So I think that's going to be next. I'm going to stencil these out. Maybe these will do for now. They probably won't. But yeah, I'll see if I can make some blackout blinds with that. Then it's going to be a case of trying to actually get some kind of a green screen. And I mean, it's not a huge amount of space. I don't know. It might work. Who knows? Good morning. Have my spiced ginger tea. Come and have a look. What we are doing today is making some blackout blinds. I've got my kind of fun selection of tools there. So once again, the reason for this is that in order to be able to film a music video, I'm going to need to control the lighting. And one of the great things about living on a narrowboat, I've found, is you get a lot of daylight. You don't just get sun from big windows, you get reflections on the water. That's a disadvantage, again, when you're filming for, say, more than an hour and you need the lighting to be consistent. So I've got to make everything as dark as possible. Now, I've already got 2 of them done, this one and the one on the other side. Simply 5mm plywood with these kind of adhesive handles stuck on them. I had to cut out some little slats you can see there for that bit where the window sticks out. I think I'm going to get some dustbin liner and kind of put it around there again to block that light out. I've got a couple of other windows that have got different fittings, so that's going to be the challenge for this morning. I would film myself doing it. It's not that kind of maker channel because I'm not good enough to be able to do that kind of time effectively. So you'll just have to take my word for the fact that like I did it and didn't get someone else to do it. One more thing to talk about, and this is kind of me reassuring myself. It's once again been a couple of months since I've actually really had the time to do anything for this particular episode and this channel. And you can't run a sustainable YouTube channel by taking that long to get stuff done. Except that There's a couple of reasons why, whilst I'm not quite happy with it, I am happy with the fact that it's taken this long. I suppose the first is a line I keep thinking of from a book called Algorithms to Live by these people, wherever it is I'm going to put it. To a certain extent, I think the part of the reason why I wanted to have a band name of James Bell and the Algorithm was kind of with this book in mind. Anyway, this quote comes from someone I'd never heard of, but a very influential figure apparently in the computer programming world. And he said, "Premature optimization is the root of all evil." And what I took that to mean is that he's found in the computer programming world that it's a recurring problem that programmers try to make the computer program or the system as efficient and effective and optimized as possible before they've actually finished building it. So they don't really know what the problems are. They might not even really know what the thing is supposed to do yet. They're seemingly optimizing, but what they're probably doing is optimizing for the wrong thing because they don't know how the system is going to work. And so they're kind of baking inefficiency into the process. Now, I've been thinking about this a lot when thinking about how to do a YouTube channel. There's this sort of idea that you just start off by producing as much content as possible, and whatever the audience likes, and you double down on that. Don't try and second guess the audience. And I feel like that, first of all, that might make sense and might still make sense for people other than me. But I get the sense that that maybe that's not how things work anymore, and certainly that's not how things work with me. First of all, I feel like there's too much competition, that's something you do for a new platform where there's more demand than there is supply, when there are more people who are hungry for content than there are people who are supplying it. But on something like YouTube, there are so many great YouTubers, so many who are basically making, what 10 or 20 years ago would be thought of as TV programs. So it's that level of production. And I feel like I don't want to, I'm not going to be able to make quality videos that I would want to watch by trying to be too consistent, by trying to do more than I can actually manage. In fact, I've done this before with projects in the past. I've tried to regularly produce content and it just hasn't been very good. So I'd much rather take much longer in getting the first 1, 2, maybe 3 episodes as good as possible, and then really focus on how to do that more quickly, rather than just work quickly and then work out how to get better. I just don't think I'll be able to do that. So that's one aspect. I don't want to do the premature optimization before I know what the channel is about. The other thing is, in the past, and really like a long time ago, I would take on projects and I would do nothing else until I'd got them finished. I'd be like completely single-minded. And I have come to find that for me, that's really rough on my motivation. Because projects always take much longer than you think they're going to take. You never factor in the problems because, in my experience, every project I've worked on has had at least 2 big major problems that if I told my previous self about them, my previous self would have been like, I can't imagine that's going to be a problem. That sounds unlikely. Stuff you never would have seen coming. It's always going to take much, much longer than you think it's going to take. And there comes a point where you've put everything else aside and you have just focused on this thing, and you look around and you realize that it's already taken 3 times longer than you thought the whole process would take, and you're maybe halfway through, and you can't help but feel, what am I doing with my life? This is just an enormous waste of time. So I find it's much better when working on a big project to make sure you're not just working on, one big thing. It's also the case that, there's bills to pay. I would love to be able to spend much more time on this YouTube channel, but I have to be realistic, so it takes time. The question, and I know I've asked this question before, is am I going to be able to speed things up once I've figured out what the process is? All right, here's a fun little challenge. So I've shot and edited most of the music video. And I noticed that the instrumental sections, the bits in between the verses, really needed just more instrumental playing, and particularly the organ. So I thought I'm just going to quickly kind of pop in today and just do some quick late shooting to edit in tonight. And I've come to the organ and I found that I can't play it. As simple as that. Very me problem, this. So left hand, I can do this. So I mean, like I when I recorded it in little bits, which I will so often do. It's technically known in the music business as cheating. So left hand, yeah. Come on. Not exactly smooth, but I mean, I can just give that a little bit of practice. But it's this, I just can't do that quick enough. I mean, I can practice it, but I just looking at it, I got to get from there to that, and I'm not going to be able to do that cleanly up to speed, even if I'm like miming to it, I think. Well, I don't know. I'll have to do something, or maybe I won't. Maybe I won't use it, but I think it would be shame not to have it. So yeah, who knows? Hopefully I'll think of something. All right, so I thought I'd fixed it. I thought it was really very straightforward. I just needed to slow down the backing track that I was playing to and then play it again slowly. But I'm listening to it and I don't think that's going to work. I'm trying to think back to when I recorded it. I'm sure when I recorded it, and it was a while ago now, I would have just kind of splurged something that felt like the right emotion, and then I would have gone in and tidied it up afterwards. So I probably never did a clean take of it. Now the thing is, I know I could do it. I know it's just a question of practice. This is just the big trade-off in terms of timing. Like, do I want to do this for a shot that may be a couple of seconds twice in the video? That's a lot of time for just that, and that's not the kind of trade-off I want to make for this. If I was going to do an authentic performance, I'd do the thing live. So I'm going to need to think of something else. I'll still do that left-hand bit, but I think I'm going to need to think of something else to cover those instrumental sections where just the straight performance to camera, I feel, gets repetitive. Now, you know what? I'm calling it. It really does feel to me like that, those instrumental sections, sort of at the end of each verse, you know, like the main thing that's going on is that organ right-hand part, the part that I can't play. And it sort of feels like, you know, we should see that. You should see me playing it. Just looking at what I actually played, it's too complicated for it to be worthwhile the time as far as I'm concerned. And that means it's not really worth filming the left hand either. I think it makes sense of like, okay, don't do organ at all. Find something else for those sections. I'll have to think of something else for those sections to be about. Musically, they're about that organ right hand, but visually, they're going to need to be about something else. There's going to need to be a visual theme, I guess. By the way, message for future me. Next time you think you're going to just quickly do some motion graphics, just remember that unless you're actually a professional animator, there's no such thing as quick motion graphics. Right. Lest boat life seems too much like fun and games, work has stopped for the time being to do one of my top 6 least favourite jobs, changing yet another water pump. Oxford has got extremely hard water, it screws my water pumps. My neighbours have assured me that my pumps are too cheap. That sounds like prison slang, but it's not. So hopefully this will mean I won't need to change it for another 5 years or something. I live in eternal optimism. Anyway, this is what we're... Come and join. Enjoy, enjoy. This is the state I'm in. All right. Every time it's like an emotional roller coaster. Okay, so I'm nearing the end of this process. At the beginning of this, I said I thought it was unlikely that anyone would ever see this video. And there was one reason particularly for that. And that's that I'm just not sure whether or not I can get the song Uptown Funk copyrighted. I don't know how that works. I've kind of been putting it off till the very end. And I suppose I've been putting it off to the very end because if I found out that I was never going to show it, that might take some of the joy out of the making process. But I'm going to go next door now, fire up the computer, have a look and see. Like, I don't mind with this first song if it's kind of expensive, but there is obviously going to be a kind of price limit beyond which I just like can't justify spending it. So let's find out. Okay, I've had a look at the website for the company that's kind of recommended for getting licensing. Just getting audio only seems to be pretty affordable. Seems to be between kind of $15 and $50. But if you're making a music video with it, you don't just have the mechanical copyright, you have the synchronization. So this company does seem to sell custom licenses. They cost $300 for 5 tracks. And I saw on the website, it says $300. And then underneath it, it says, improve your odds, suggesting that you might pay them $300 and you won't get a license at the end of it, which I initially did feel like, how very the music business. But I don't know. That actually sounds like kind of an okay deal. There are more fees on top of that. I think 30% of publishing rights as well. I would expect to pay quite a bit more for Uptown Funk because I think a track that's that big a hit, I think it's worth more. I guess it makes sense for me to think about what the next videos are going to be. I've got like a vague idea, but maybe I should nail that down and then do the next 5. And then at least I know that the rights are sorted out then. So, all right, I'll do a little bit more digging. Basically, if I can make this work and I can afford it, you'll see this Uptown Funk video. And if I can't, you won't. Yes. The video is done, and although a lot of it looks unprofessional to me, I'm actually really happy with it. One change of direction I went into for the video was I was originally thinking of leaning into not just like the sound of Say It Loud era James Brown, but his whole impact on popular culture, which was huge. So I was thinking of doing footage of him and Muhammad Ali and Malcolm X and the backdrop of the civil rights movement, and I very quickly realized that just was not going to work. Uptown Funk is a very kind of light, fun song, and yeah, that would just hit a whole host of like awkward tonal shifts. Also, like, it's not my culture, and if I was going to do something like that, I'd need to collaborate with someone whose culture it is. Another issue is that over the decades, everybody has sampled James Brown in one way or another. His look, his sound, his lyrics, and actually, I mean, relatively recently, there's a current artist who I feel like has done sort of the definitive modern take on James Brown, and that's Janelle Monáe in the song Tightrope. I am not going to do anything as good as that in that lane, so yeah. So what I ended up doing instead was filling the video with more general kind of 1960s pop culture references, things like the moon landing, Richard Nixon, movie title sequences of Alfred Hitchcock and the James Bond films, and quite a bit on the murderous HAL 9000 AI from the film 2001: A Space Odyssey. Not entirely sure why. I mean, I'm an obsessive fan, so that might be part of it. Uptown Funk, the sound in the video was originally set in the 80s, and it's set in New York, and Christopher Walken's a really kind of New York actor. So, and the song references Michelle Pfeiffer, and I think that's probably what put it in my head. Just for context, when I first moved onto this boat over a decade ago, after a particularly brutal breakup, I felt like the most productive way to spend the next 12 months wasn't to kind of get out and meet new people, but to just try to perfect my Christopher Walken impersonation. And even then, like, it wasn't particularly good. I mentioned that in preface to the fact that I was going to start this Uptown Funk music video for some reason with me doing a recreation of what I find hilarious scene from the movie musical Puss in Boots. Christopher Walken is kind of harassing a band leader, saying, "Nobody does court dancing anymore. Don't tell me you don't know any country dancers." But then I realized that I would essentially be making an in-joke just for myself. And for my first YouTube video, that's probably a mistake.
That's probably a mistake.
Okay, for me, the most important thing this track and this video needed to achieve was it needed to create the right feeling, the right kind of emotion, the right mood. And for me, it did that. So that is actually the thing I'm happiest with. Being a bit more specific, I was really surprised how well the horns sounded. I mean, that was just using samples, and usually you can tell when they're samples. To me, that sounds like a live, horn section. What else? I liked the way the green screen experiment worked, particularly at the beginning of the video. That said, I like how the green screen experiment worked, but some of it, particularly at the end, is shockingly bad. Like, you can pause and I have no hands. So yeah, but in the process of doing it, I felt like I learnt from my mistakes, and I would hope the next time I do green screen, it's going to look a lot better. Also, this is a tiny thing, but this time I wasn't quite confident enough in my color correction skills to tone down my incredibly flushed cheeks towards the end of the video. I kind of end up looking like your drunk uncle at Christmas. I'm actually doing it now. I realize I'm sort of blushing on camera, which I didn't think would be a problem, but every day's a school day. All right, here's another one. I kind of feel like, for me at least, there's an unavoidable comparison between my vocal ability and Bruno Mars's vocal ability. I think this is why people tend to do radically different versions of really successful songs with great singers, because I feel like his vocal ad-libs are kind of like a nimble tennis player and mine are kind of like a bumper car. Another maybe sort of unavoidable problem is how long the track is. I feel like for a pop track, every second above 3.5 minutes needs a better and better reason for existing. And this one racks in at just under 6 minutes. But then again, I wanted to do the whole track and I didn't want to cut anything out. So what can you do? But far and away, the biggest problem for me has been how long this whole process has taken. It took 2 years. And there are reasons for that. Part of it was I was just learning to be a filmmaker. I don't have any training in filmmaking. No one's taught me how to operate a camera or edit. So there's been a lot of trial and error. Part of it has been me figuring out the format as I go along. Again, a lot more trial and error. Part of it has also been just juggling day jobs and childcare and just generally keeping the lights on. But perhaps the biggest and most frustrating component of that is I just work really slowly. This really reinforced it for me. I just work really slowly. I know that I have to kind of take my sweet time if I want any given project to give me the results that I want. So, it drives me mad, but I'm kind of learning to live with it. Although that said, whether or not I can actually build an audience on YouTube with this slower production rate remains to be seen. I have learnt so much about the way that I work. I'm a really big fan of Adam Savage, movie effects guy at Industrial Light and Magic, former host of the TV show Mythbusters, and now YouTuber extraordinaire. And he talks a lot about how on every single project he's working on, he has this phenomenon where 70% of the way through, he's just hit with this panic where he doesn't know what the hell he's doing and he feels completely out of his depth. And he said when he was working at Industrial Light and Magic, he always thought someone was going to tap him on the shoulder and say, look, you clearly don't know what you're doing. You need to leave. But he said that he's learnt that happens every time. And now that he knows that, he knows he just needs to push through and he'll finish fine. What I learnt on this is that I get that, but I don't get it 70% of the way through. I get it 10% of the way through. I have this initial kind of burst of confidence, maybe even arrogance. I'm just like, yep, this is going to be simple. I am good at this. And then everything I do just sounds terrible. But now that I know I just need to push through that, and it's just the way I work, and that's kind of the order I do things, and then it starts to take shape. So that was something I learned. Something else I learned from this whole process is really fundamental about how I think I'm going to make these videos in future, because I feel like I've figured out the filming style.
What I thought I was going to need to do was plan everything meticulously in advance. I thought I was going to need to basically storyboard everything. As I got into it, I realized what made a lot more sense was just shooting a whole bunch of options and then finding it in the edit. It makes sense because it's less kind of time intensive. It's very difficult to imagine how everything is going to fit together when you can see nothing. But also, just more practically, when I think about the times when I've planned everything in advance, I just end up with boring results. So much of what I do is about happy accidents. So yeah, this was really important for me. Working out that for this particular format, it's all about finding it in the edit. And one more specific aspect of that, I did loosely kind of stick to a 3-act structure in the video, but I realized that when it actually comes to coming up with ideas, it's just as simple as, all right, now do something interesting. Now do something different and interesting over and over again, moment to moment. And I don't need any more of a structure than that. Like I can just feel like, all right, we've had enough of this idea, time to move on to something else. And I feel like, and you know, future videos may kind of scupper this, but I feel like that's actually all I need when editing videos. It's just that sense of the, all right, that's done, time for something new. I just want to give a very quick warning to anyone who's sensitive to flashing images. I don't think this video is going to be a problem, but there are like a couple of little bits where it does have a flashing effect, so I just wanted to flag that. Right, 2 years in the making. Let's watch the video.